Moonshiners, I welcome you. Fasten your seatbelts, we're continuing our dive into the world of Moonshine. The next topic is still about the appearance, and this time it's about templates. We've already familiarized ourselves with templates in principle, how you can switch between compact and main templates. All of this is done in the same place where we declared menu items, in Moonshine layout. But I also want to add some new information for you now. You can have as many of these templates as you want, and they can be named however you like. To create another template, you can use the command php artisan moonshine layout. Okay, now specify the name, let's say, for example, default. You'll be asked again whether it's compact or not. Here, it's up to your preference. Let's choose no for now. And this next question is extremely important. Should we use it as the default in the system? Let's choose no for now, but let's talk about what this means. If we had said yes, then in the config, moonshine PHP file, in the layout section, our default would have been recorded here, and it would always be used by default. What does used by default mean? The foundation of Moonshine is pages. We've seen the dashboard, we've seen CRUD pages. And for each page, you can specify its own template using the layout property. Then, you can specify the class string of the template you want to use, in our case, default. And then, specifically, the dashboard page would use this template. All other pages, where it's not specified, would use the system template from the config, i.e., Moonshine layout. This way, you can have a huge number of pages, and each of them can have its own template. Each can have its own assets, its own menu, meaning you can structure them however you like. But keep this in mind, when we get to the section about pages, we'll dive into it again. For now, just know that there can be as many templates as you want, and they can be customized in different ways. Okay, let's return to the templates section. As I've already told you, and as I recall, I've mentioned it multiple times, everything in Moonshine is components. Blade components. The logo is a component. The theme switcher is a component. The breadcrumb is a component. The belt is a component. Buttons, all components, tables, the sidebar. I'll tell you more. All HTML tags, starting from HTML, head, body, these are all components. Let's take a look at how this looks. The set of these components is located in the build method. They are moved to the parent because you won't always need to change them, so they don't clutter the view here. But you can change them using quick methods or simply move them. If you have serious changes, you can copy everything that's here, return it, and then customize it as you like. Here you have the layout. You can already see that it starts from the HTML tag. We've also worked at the menu item level and have already encountered custom attributes. You can specify anything you want. Let's again add data, hello world. Let's go back, refresh the page, inspect it, and we'll see that the HTML tag now has the data, hello world attribute. This means you can fully control the entire page directly from the backend. Every HTML tag, every attribute, all of this is available to you directly from the template. There can be multiple templates. Just imagine, you have a huge admin panel with divisions for teams, specific roles, and each role can have its own template, displayed differently in Moonshine. All pages can be different. The possibilities are incredible. Now, let's go through a bit more and add a top bar at the top. Let's refresh the page, and we'll see that the top bar is also duplicated at the top, with the profile, logout button, and theme switcher. If we want, we can leave only the top bar and remove the sidebar. Okay, let's go back and see it in this way. And as you can see, you can add your own components. Remove something, change it to your liking. If you don't want the title to be displayed, just comment it out, done, no title. If you want to add something, add it. But as you can see, there are quick methods for things you often work with. The footer, not something you work with often, but right when you start interacting with the admin panel, your build looks like before, just the parent build. And let's say you need to change the footer, replace "Made with Love" by cut code with your own company name or something else. You don't want to extract all the components from the parent. You just take the get footer component and change it. As you can see, there's even a quick method, get footer copyright. You take it, and here we just have a string, so you return whatever you need. Okay, I'm not very creative, so let's go with hello world again. And we see that we've quickly changed the footer. But at the same time, we see there's a link to the documentation. We don't need it. We'll take the get footer component method, get the entire component, but then we'll pass an empty menu so that, for example, nothing is displayed. Okay, we see the documentation link is gone. Or we can make a link to the homepage. Okay, let's go back, and now we have a link to the homepage. We won't focus on the footer right now, as it's a separate component. It's in the documentation, and it has many methods. If you need to customize it, you can refer to the documentation and build it your way. The main thing here is to understand that there are such quick methods. But besides me having this information, it's also described in the documentation. Here we have an example where the entire build, even without methods, is laid out directly in the documentation. We see the head, meta, favicon, assets, and everything, even a bunch of additional divs. Just so you don't have to interact with this, we've created quick, sugary methods that allow you to access a specific area. Next, we'll see an example. What we've done, as you can see, there's even a method for getFooterMenu to quickly change the footer menu. getFooterCopyright, we've done that. And additional methods. Let's say, what else will you often need to change? Well, of course, the logo. We've already covered at the configuration level that the logo is set through the config. Here it is, logo small. And accordingly, if you're using the MoonShine service provider, then through the config here, you can also specify the logo. And accordingly, you'll have two parameters, logo and whether it's small or not. If it's just a logo, then leave small as false. And then add another logo, but here you specify small as true. This way, you specify the standard logo and the logo for when the sidebar or menu is collapsed. But we've already understood that there can be multiple layouts, a bunch of layouts, each for its own page. Let's say you want to use one logo on certain pages, for example, resource pages for a specific team. Their logo, their division's branding. You'll agree that the approach with the config or the provider isn't very suitable here. You'd need to use callbacks to check where exactly we are in terms of the request and do something. But different templates provide this opportunity. And you simply specify a specific template for certain pages and then use the quick method getLogo to override it. Specify that if it's a small logo, then return a specific image. Or return an image that will be responsible for this template by default when our sidebar or top bar is not closed. These quick methods allow us to change the template. As you can see, there's also a quick method for the component itself. It's not just some image, it's a whole component. If we call getLogoComponent, we'll see that this is the component we have here, for which we can also perform additional customization later. The same goes for the home URL. It's set through the config, but you can also take getHomeURL and override it for a specific template. You'll agree, it's cool, especially when you understand that there can be as many templates as you want. All these quick methods are present in the documentation with descriptions of what they represent. We've also gone through the section on creating templates. We've seen how they're created, and right in the documentation, at the layout level, we get all this information, that by default, the template is taken from the config. But if a specific page has another template specified, it will take priority. It will be used, and for all others where it's not specified, the system template will be used. Next, friends, we see the section on assets. But we also see it as a separate section in the documentation, under the appearance section. And we'll talk about it a bit later. Let's continue exploring the layout section. And here, we're in for an interesting point. We've already seen that we also have a compact template. To enable it, you need to extend compact layout. And the documentation also tells us that if you pay attention, the compact theme is square. For some, this might not seem like a very beautiful solution, but you can take this ready-made code and add it to the assets method. Let's copy it. We've had to touch on assets, but let's do it quickly for now. Okay, let's import from the Asset Manager namespace. Let's go back, refresh the page, and we'll see that our theme is no longer square. We have rounded corners everywhere, radii everywhere. Well, you can also replace the values of these radii with your own right from here. Let's go back to the documentation, and the next section is favicons. This is actually an important section, because, just like the logo, you'll want to change the favicon. And most likely, you won't want to leave the default MoonShine favicon. For this, you'll need to override the getFavicon method, specify the custom assets method, and then declare all the icons you need. Apple Touch, 32 by 32, 16 by 16, and everything else that any generator suggests. If you're unsure about something, just leave it out, and that parameter won't be specified. but these first three are 100% mandatory. Next, friends, we've already covered the menu in detail, separately, and here they're hinting again that this possibility exists. They also mention that we have both a sidebar and a top bar. We've already looked at this possibility, we uncommented the top bar, left both, left only the top bar, and by default, we saw when only the sidebar is present. Colors, friends. Colors are also a separate section. We'll get to it, and it's also configured at the level of each template. That's the feature. Each template can differ maximally, but with Color Manager, and with Asset Manager, you can also work globally at the provider level, and specify all these settings for all themes. Finally, friends, an important section. As I told you earlier, in the MoonShine version 2 guide, we didn't just make an admin panel on MoonShine, we made the entire website on MoonShine. And we didn't use class-based components, but directly inside Blade, declared the template like this, every tag, everything that's placed. And exactly the same as we have by default through layout. We demonstrated it here in the documentation, through simply calling Blade components. And that's how everything works in MoonShine. These are Blade components. You can declare them both on the backend through classes and in Blade files themselves by calling xMoonshine followed by the component name. Let's step away from the topic for a moment. Let's take a look at the MoonShine website. This landing page, and even the documentation, has nothing to do with MoonShine. But the profile, the personal account, is implemented on MoonShine. Here we see it, quickly put together, and this is also MoonShine. If we log out, we'll also see the login form for the personal account, which is also MoonShine. So you can combine things. You can build an entire MVP project on MoonShine, create a personal account where everything is within the authentication framework, and also make an admin panel, a personal account, and something on the client side right away. In general, MoonShine is not just an admin panel. Okay, friends, we've figured out the template. We've understood that the foundation is the build method, within components. That everything in the template is components. You can extract from the parent or configure things with quick methods. And everything in MoonShine is pages, here they are. And they can also have their own template, each page its own, where everything can be maximally customized. Okay, let's move on. So, friends, the next section is Asset Manager. To quickly connect scripts, styles, and all this is done very simply, right at the template level. But jumping ahead, I can tell you that you can connect assets not only at the template level but also at the level of each resource, page, or globally in the service provider. After that, it will be present everywhere, in all templates. You can do the same at the package level, and in general, the documentation talks about all of this. We see the template, and we've already seen this method and added one of the types of assets. The same thing we see here in the example, we see the service provider. We see the CRUD resource, which we don't yet know what it is. But we've already peeked ahead and know that through it, you can also add assets. Pages, which we've also briefly touched on. And we know that in MoonShine, everything is components. And on the fly, you can add assets to any component. And not just on the fly, when developing your own component, you can declare assets. And later, when rendering these components, they will also be added to the page. There are many ways, all of them are listed in the documentation. Let's take a quick look at what types of assets we have. As we can see, there are 5 types. You can add a JS object, and on the page, in the head block, a script src will appear with the link you specify. The same goes for CSS, but the tag will be link. Inline CSS, you can directly add inline styles through the Asset Manager, whatever you need, specific classes, and so on. And on the page, a style tag will appear with all your rules inside. The same goes for inline JS, but with scripts. There's also the raw type, meaning anything can be added to the head, it could be a meta tag, or even just hello world. So, raw information, arbitrary content. Let's see how this works. Let's go back, let's return to the app layout. I still like it more. And in general, we need the assets method. If we dive into the parent assets, we'll see that by default, a JS file is connected with all the scripts MoonShine needs, and a CSS file. If we go back to compact layout and dive into the parent assets, we'll see that the same things are present as in the main layout. So, the most important things, and also a minimalistic CSS is added, which adds this compact theme. This way, when developing your own template, you can completely abandon all the system defaults and write your own, or keep and supplement them, as is done with the compact theme. Next, we also see that we've already added one of the types of assets, inline CSS. Let's see how it looks on the page. Let's inspect, but first, let's switch back to app layout. Let's go to the head section, and we'll see the inline CSS here. A style tag was added with the content we passed, here it is. Although we saw more data there, because this isn't entirely our block, this asset came out of the box, but here's our root with the radii. Here it is, looking great. So, we're observing the system where, under the hood, MoonShine also adds its own styles through the asset manager. And they're also present here, in addition to the ones you added. If you now take and instead of inline CSS, let's say, remove the JS from the asset manager. Let's make a link, let's say to something that doesn't exist, like js.js, just to see that it's added. Okay, we already see a 404 error. But at the same time, we see the script for js.js, and the current MoonShine version is also added. Versioning can also be managed. You can add custom attributes, since this is still a component, classes and everything else. You can specify defer, which is often used for assets. That's why there's sugar for interacting with assets. Let's say we added JS. Let's add CSS, but let's name it css.css. The same thing will happen with it. They will be present here, link for css.css, but of course, it doesn't exist. Let's also add inline.js, and inside, let's output some alert. Okay, let's go back, refresh the page, and we'll see that an alert appears. And we can also add such assets. If we do raw, which we talked about, and just leave an alert, then in this case, nothing will be called, because it's just text. For it to work the same as inline.js, you need to add a script tag. That is, fully customize it, output everything we need. And in this case, we'll get the same behavior as with inline.js. These are the features of the asset manager. We'll dive deeper into this topic when we look at resources and pages. We'll peek and observe that assets can also be added within resources, meaning you can do the following. You don't have to have certain CSS or JS globally across all templates, only when you're in this specific resource. When it's active, or in this one, certain assets will be loaded. Or only for specific pages, let's say you're in the profile, and only here will the assets be loaded. Or only where this text field is present. Or this box component. Or when you create your own component or field, it comes with its own assets, and the user who will use your package, adding it to pages, will also pull in these assets. That's the logic. We've somewhat gone through the documentation. We know there are attributes. We know there's deferred loading using sugar methods. We've seen examples with inline.js, raw, and raw content. We also see that if we interact with the asset manager not from the layout but from the provider or resources, we can also access it. And either add assets at the beginning, at the end, or modify the entire list, as in this example, excluding certain assets or sorting them, adding your own versioning if needed. And we've also familiarized ourselves with the fact that there are many places for assets besides the template, but we don't yet fully know all these places. Okay, friends, we've figured out assets, and now we're moving to the next section, Color Manager. I think this is an important section, and you'll use it often. If you don't like the default color scheme, for example, that our buttons are pink and purple, like the menu items, you can override all of this. For this, you also go to MoonShine Layout, to a specific layout. And here, using the Colors method and the Color Manager, you set the colors as you like. You can also do this globally. Let's take a moment to talk about working globally. Since we've touched on this topic with Asset Manager and now with Color Manager, but haven't looked at it yet, we have the MoonShine Service Provider, and it has a boot method that supports injections. And you can add whatever you need. Let's say you want to interact with the Asset Manager. Okay, Asset Manager contract. Assets. And let's say you also need the Color Manager contract. Colors. And then you'll have the necessary instance. You can directly add from here. Add objects of the types we've already covered, JS, CSS, inline, and so on. The same goes for colors. And then, using the set method or sugar methods, you can globally set all the colors. Okay, but most likely, you'll work in templates. Let's do that. We have the colors method, and we'll uncomment it and do the following. In Color Manager, there's a quick method. If you refer to it, you'll see the body color, the primary color. So, primary buttons, there's secondary. So, primary is purple, secondary is pink. Background for error notifications, the same but for text, and so on. You'll find all the options here, plus you can read the documentation about them. Dividers, borders, everything can be set to your own color. In this case, we've set primary. Let's go back, refresh the page, and we'll see that our primary buttons have turned black. Let's also make secondary black. Okay, let's go back. It's not very pretty, but we've changed the button colors. And everything else in MoonShine, backgrounds, sidebar, and so on, can also be customized through Color Manager. You just need to spend some time figuring out which parameters control what, and then you can start a project and quickly bring it to the color scheme required by the brand you're developing the admin panel for. Okay, friends, let's go back to the documentation. Besides what I've told you, all of this is present here. With sugar methods and directly with all the parameters. We use Tailwind, there are various shades, and you can not only change the color but also the shades, if the option is available. And all of this is described here in the documentation. Both sugar methods and just through set and the corresponding parameter. So you understand, this is Tailwind, this is CSS. All these parameters are added to the head, as we've already seen, in the style method. And here we have a specific primary color, dark, warning, and so on. All of this is separated into individual parameters, and you set them. You can set them as HEX, or as RGB. Under the hood, MoonShine will convert everything to the required format. As you can see, even in the documentation, in this case, it's RGB. But when we just did it through the layout, we used HEX. Overall, we see a lot of information here in the documentation. How to pull in Color Manager even in projects where MoonShine isn't used, and output all these parameters in HTML. How to use additional utilities, helpers, and independently convert RGB to HEX, HEX to RGB, if needed. We also see directly in the documentation how to work globally with Color Manager. We also see the doc block, which gives us access to all the sugar methods. In general, even now, as I'm explaining and looking at it, I'm amazed at how well the documentation is written. You don't even need to show it, just read it, explain what controls what, and it will give everyone clarity. Friends, we're finishing up with the appearance. And the last section in the appearance is icons. We've already looked at icons. Now, let's take a closer look at them. We've already played with icons at the menu manager level, specifying them in menu item. But they're not only present in the menu. You can specify icons for buttons, tabs, and many components that have this method, which allows you to additionally specify an icon. By default, we use hero icons. You can take a look at them, see what's available. But we've also duplicated them in the documentation itself. If you look at hero icons, you'll see they have several display types. Outline, these unfilled ones. Solid, when they're filled with color inside. Mini, a smaller version. And micro, very small. The same types are present in MoonShine. By default, they're outline. If you just specify the icon name, it will be the outline type. If you switch to solid, for example, you need to specify the prefix S. This indicates that they're of this type. The same goes for mini and compact. Since mini and micro would have the prefix M, we made the prefix C and called them compact. Okay, friends, let's play around a bit, create a menu item, and add an icon. As you can see, PHP Storm suggests and immediately tells me that there's a directory S. There's a specific set of outline icons. And if I start typing, it will suggest all of them. And this autocomplete is provided by the MetaStorm plugin. I also recommend you install it. MoonShine has a ready-made config for it, which will give you a lot of convenience for autocomplete and interaction with MoonShine. MetaStorm, that's what it's called. Install it, and you'll use this feature. Now, we've specified the user's icon, as far as I know, correctly. Let's go back, refresh the page, and we'll see that it's present and it's outline. If we add the prefix S, it will become filled. The same goes for other types. But that's not all regarding icons in MoonShine. You can also specify your own path. As you can see, there's a path parameter. By default, it's MoonShine, icons, and so on. But you can do the following. Set the path to icons, and MoonShine will look for the icon in your resources icons directory. Let's create one to demonstrate how this works. Icons. We've also specified through the dot that this directory means S, and inside, a PHP file user's blade. Yes, this is still a blade file, and inside, there should be an SVG icon, or any content. If you move an icon here, let's take something from hero icons, let's say like this. Let's go back to admins, refresh the page, and we'll see that our icon has changed. So, here, any content will be rendered, and we see TT. If you want to add an image, that will also work. But let's go back to menu item and, besides the icon path, consider another possibility. Let's make TT, as we already did. But at the same time, let's set custom to true, and now we won't search for any file at all, we'll just render the content we pass. And let it be any text, or SVG, or let's say you use the Laravel blade icons package. And with the helper, you'll output the icons you need. In general, there are many possibilities. Also, friends, I just remembered, let's go to the marketplace section, and take a look at an interesting package, MoonShine Iconify by Yevgeny Yurchenko. Let's take a look at it. Let's go to GitHub. And this package provides even more possibilities for icons. You'll be able to use a huge number of packs, all of them will be cached, and you'll store only the icons you use in your resources. In general, there are a lot of possibilities for icons. If you're missing what's currently in MoonShine, if you want more possibilities, more customization, I recommend using this package. It supports version 3, and you can use it. And that's it, friends, we've gone through another section, fully covered it. Appearance, we have the knowledge and are ready to move on to resources and pages. That's all, friends. Don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, and don't forget about our MoonShine chat, where we discuss and help newcomers. That's all, see you in the next video on the MoonShine Video Guides channel.